Welcome to Above Replacement Radio. I am your host, Chris Giolito. I might be becoming a bad baseball fan who can't enjoy the romantic things because of advanced statistics. 15 years from now, I want to be on the early baseball committee. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran.
I literally have the Fangraphs hoodie, the Baseball Reference t-shirt, just repping some stats, you know what I'm saying?
It's not necessarily Hall of Fame, it's not necessarily above average, but we can guarantee you we are better than just the standard replacement level college sophomore.
And welcome to Above Replacement Radio. We're talking baseball kind of whenever. I'm your host, Chris Giolito. Over there on the other side of the screen is Daniel Curran. How you doing, Daniel?
Chris, I'm doing very well today. It's going to be a really fun episode. We have a guest, which I'm super excited about. I've been super excited about for a while now. Mike Petriello of MLB.com. You may know him from the StatCast broadcasts, from his articles on Baseball Savant, from his Twitter feed, from his defensive threads on Twitter. He's a guy that we've been looking forward to having for a while, and we finally got to make it happen today. So that's very exciting for us.
Yes, he continues to be a very much part of the baseball stats world and everything Baseball Savant. And he mentioned in the interview about, that he is a writer. He's known as a writer, but he also does a lot more with Baseball Savant and everything that goes into that. And yeah, it was a pleasure to talk to him, get another side of Baseball Savant. And I know last year we talked to Sarah Langs around this time last year, who, is another great contributor to MLB.com and Baseball Savant. So it was good to get another part of that.
Yeah, no, it was, I think, a pretty cool interview. He's very awesome, obviously. And we're excited for you guys to listen to it.
For sure. And, later in the episode, we will be getting into the Lucas Giolito trade to the Angels, as well as the Amed Rosario and Noah Syndergaard trade. However, first, we will get into that interview that we just discussed, and without further ado, here is Mike Petriello. And we are happy to welcome you may know him from his work on MLB.com, seen a lot on the Baseball Savant front page and whatnot, analyzing players, analyzing everything important going on in Major League Baseball right now. It is Mike Petriello. How you doing, Mike?
Hey guys, good morning. Happy to be here.
Mike, it's really good to have you on the show. We've been fans of your work for a while, and one thing that we love to ask our guests that specialize in sabermetrics is, how did you go from kind of like using like basic stats to evaluate players, like the batting average, home run, RBI type of stats, to eventually leading into like OPS, and then eventually like exit velocity, launch angle, batted ball metrics?
Well, I'd like to say I have some advanced stats background. I'm a history major, so I do not.
Yeah,
if you go back to when I was real young, I have a vivid memory of being like 8 and reading like the Bill James 1987 annual or whatever. And obviously, he didn't have quite the same sabermetrics back then, but certainly the way he wrote about it was very interesting. And it was pretty clear, even at the time, like even into the 90s, like batting average. Whenever I explain the flaws in batting average, I've never had anybody say, "Oh no, that doesn't make sense." It's like, "Oh yeah, walks are good, home runs are good too. Let's value those things," right? So when I started writing about baseball, it was in around 2007. And I think at that time was really an interesting point in baseball history, because it was like post the Moneyball book and Pitch FX was starting to come out, but you still had some of these old school writers who'd been around since like the 60s and were very, against any of this stuff. So there was a real like open window if you could not only like understand the new metrics, but explain them in an interesting way, which I think is kind of what helped me get my start. It's harder now because like all the beat writers now are, my age or younger, and they've come up with this stuff too. So like they're totally on board. There's no like fighting against it anymore, other than like talk radio callers. You know what I mean? So for me, it was kind of like right place, right time, because that was when things were starting to become accepted and then later on mainstream. And I like to say my career couldn't have happened 10 years earlier or 10 years later. I don't think it like kind of had to be right about then.
Right. That definitely makes a lot of sense. And one thing I am curious of, kind of with all people like this, you know, obviously with beat writers, it would probably be, it's very accepted upon, you know, talking about this stuff. But if you're in a setting with, you know, maybe a casual baseball fan who wants to talk baseball, and they're talking about, they're evaluating players based on batting average, what do you try to do in, like, or just straight up ERA and not any other metrics? Like, is there anything that you try to go into without trying to go on a full, you know, Baseball Savant article, but still try to make it make sense for them?
Yeah, nobody, you know, either in person or on TV wants like an algebra article. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it sort of depends on the audience. If it's just like some random person next to you at a bar, then it probably doesn't matter how deep you go into it. You know, if it's like someone who's interested in learning or is capable of learning, then you can say, yeah, you know, I'll give you a good example is Ha-Seong Kim, who plays for San Diego, and WAR loves him this year, right? But if you look at his traditional stats, he's hitting like 270 with 35 RBIs or whatever. And I think a lot of people will be like, oh, WAR is broken. That guy's not very good. And it's like, well, okay, but gets a lot of walks. That's good. Great on the bases. He's probably going to win a Gold Glove this year, like as a complete baseball player. And that's sort of the way you go about it. It's like, it doesn't have to be scary math. It's like, hey, this is kind of valuing all of the other stuff beyond just, did he get a single in that plate appearance or not? And if you're a baseball fan, and a lot of the people who don't necessarily like stats kind of, you know, like the small ball, the other things that aren't like captured in the box score, you could say, well, some of these things are captured by different stats that are valuing these other things that these guys do.
I think a lot of the OPS pluses and the weighted runs created plus of the world, like they sound a lot more complicated than they really are, because like did you see that clip of Blake Snell this year looking at like the Padres scoreboard, talking to the announcers being like, what is WRC plus?
No, I saw Tommy
Okay.
Pham quoted about it this morning saying he's improved in it, which means Tommy Pham is great.
That, I mean, he has. But anyway, there was a clip of Blake Snell talking to the Padres broadcast, and he was looking up at the scoreboard, and they were showing like whoever the current batter was, his metrics, and weighted runs created plus was listed. And he was like, I've never seen this in my life. Does anyone know what that is? And Don Orsillo and Mark Brand were like, no idea what that is. And it sounds so much more complicated when you've never heard of it, but it's really just, you know, overall offensive production. Average is 100. Anything above or 100 is how above or below are you compared to average.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's sort of why OPS plus still persists, even though it's much worse math, is that you don't have to explain what a weighted run created is first. You know, most people at least have a vague understanding of what OPS is without needing it to be explained to them. So even though the math isn't great, it still somehow works, even though it shouldn't. And it's much easier to get across. So I have found that if you have a stat like that, where like there's a better one that's maybe 5% better, but it takes you like 80% more effort to explain it, in most cases, it's probably not worth it. Like if I was still writing a Fangraphs, then yeah, fine. But like if I'm on TV for 10 seconds, I'm just going to go with OPS plus, I think.
Mm-hmm. Some would say
Right.
weighted runs created plus makes you sound smarter if you know it, even though it's virtually the same thing.
Well, it can, but it can also turn people off who don't know it and then totally zone you out because then they think you're a giant science nerd in the bad way. I don't consider that to be a pejorative, but some people do.
No, I agree with you on that, but it is fun. So you, how did you get involved specifically with Baseball Savant? Like, how did you get to MLB.com and specifically with that portion of the website?
Yeah. Short version is I started writing a blog on my own in 2007 about the Dodgers, and people liked it and it was successful. And that got me opportunities with Baseball Prospectus and then Fangraphs. And Fangraphs had a weekly content sharing partnership with ESPN. So I would submit an article each week that would run on the ESPN website or in the magazine sometimes. And then my editor at ESPN quit and went to MLB. And a couple months later, StatCast came online and he called me and he's like, we got all these newspaper writers who mostly are not going to be able to talk about StatCast. Do you want to come over here and write about StatCast? And I was like, yeah, great. I definitely want to do that. And around the same time, Darren Willman had created Baseball Savant like as a hobby. He was a software developer in the Harris County, Texas prosecutor's office. And it was like a side thing for him. And obviously it became very popular and very useful. And he came over to MLB and brought the site. And he and I, worked together closely and became good friends. And obviously Tom Tango and Jason Bernard joined us as well. And then, Darren got hired by the Rangers. and that kind of left us in the lurch for a little bit, but the site stayed here. So we've hired a replacement for him, Dana Bennett, who's been great. And I've kind of become like the project manager, even though I don't write a line of code for the site. That is all Tom and Dana and Jason. But I know people mostly know me as a writer, but these days that's like 20% of my job is writing for the site, and the rest of it is everything else.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and yeah, it is a very interesting way to get into Baseball Savant, and yeah, the creation of it is extremely interesting as well. How you describe it there. So, and when you mention 80% is the other stuff, like, could you go into sort of what the other stuff really is?
Sure. So obviously managing Baseball Savant and the team of people who work on it. So those people mostly report to me. So I've got some managerial responsibilities. Certainly tons of time coming up with like, what are the next stats be? What are they going to look like? All that sort of stuff. Lots of time talking to broadcasters who have interest in using stats on the site, on their broadcasts, and like how to do that in an interesting way. Yesterday I was on like 600,000 emails with Google, which was not the most fun day I've had, but they are doing all sorts of advertisements, and they want to make sure that they're using stats properly and correctly. And so I was, a lot of it is just making sure that the complicated numbers are used appropriately and telling the right story. We also have a wide team of writers, 30 beat writers, a bunch of national writers, some of whom want to use stats and some of whom don't, and that's totally fine. But I'm in contact with a lot of them, helping out to make sure that they use the stats right. I help Corey Schwartz out a lot with the pitch classification. So all those are managed right from here. And Corey has been the god of that since day one, basically. But I've spent a lot of my time helping him out with those, and I think those have improved. So it's something different every day, which I think is kind of fun. It keeps it fresh.
That is very fun. Have you enjoyed the sort of transition away from exclusively being a writer and doing all this other stuff?
Yeah, that was a goal. Like on day one, I was like, I don't want to just be a writer, because it's tough to, as you've seen the way the media world has changed the last couple of years, sometimes it's tough to be. But also I didn't get my first job here full time until I was 35 years old, so like I'm sitting in Midtown Manhattan right now, and you can't see this, but right across the street, I used to work in that office building for like 5 or 6 years at a PR firm, as a project manager and building websites for like pharmaceutical companies and stuff, which was not exactly the, dream career path, but it certainly taught me a lot of other skills, right? Like how to Photoshop, how to manage, how to, write some non-database kinds of code. And when I came into this job, I was like, yeah, I want to write totally, but I don't want to just be a writer. That's not going to help my career progress. And I didn't like go to journalism school and then get a job at a newspaper. I did all this other stuff for like 15 years. So I want to be able to use some of those skills. And I think that's helped me.
Yeah. And one of the great things about Baseball Savant is that sometimes you'll think, oh, I wish there was a stat for this. And then 2 months later, you'll just get that stat. And one of those stats recently to develop has been like defensive run, like complete run value, not just outs above average, but also, especially for outfielders, including the arm value that they bring, so that a guy like Ronald Acuna Jr., like maybe his outs above average isn't that great this year, but his arm has been able to bring him up. Like, so with a stat like that, is it like, I'm sure that's, developed, very, very far before it's introduced, but kind of what goes into the detail of that stat and what leads up to that being introduced?
It's different for each one. So our team is myself, Dana Bennett, who replaced Darren, who does all the front end visuals and everything, and Jason Bernard, and then Tom Tango. And Tom is like a baseball stats legend for decades, right? He's consulted for teams, and obviously he's here full time. So and also David Adler has joined us recently too, and we spend a lot of time every day talking about what's next, and then when we have decided like what we want a stat to be, Tom is the one who will go and do all the math for it, basically. And then he'll come back and say, here's a first draft. Here's what it looks like. And does it make sense? Like, that's the first thing, really. Like, it shouldn't always, a new stat should not just like tell you exactly what your eye test thinks. Like, that's sort of pointless. But on the other hand, if you had put out, I don't know, like sprint speed rankings and it said Byron Buxton is slow and Gary Sanchez is fast, then, that's broken. So that's like the first step. Doesn't even make sense. Will it pass anybody's smell test? Once we're satisfied with that, we figure out how to present it. a lot of times the tables that Tom will produce have like 80 columns in them, which is great for getting as much detail as possible, but that's not really the way we're going to present something on the site if you want anybody to consume it. So we talk about, okay, what's this going to look like? What are the columns going to be? Should we have like a fancy custom visual for it, which some of our leaderboards do and some of them don't? How are we going to sort it, right? Will you be able to sort it by year, sort it by team, all this kind of stuff? That's like all the hard work that goes into it and why some of the things take longer than I'd like them to. But once we do that, we're satisfied. We put it up on a test site, and then we have a group of people here that, we always like to show things to get their opinions. Sarah Langs, for example, Andrew Simon, a bunch of other of our researchers and writers who we trust because they are like the serious power users of the site. And once everybody's satisfied, for a lot of things, I'll write something about it, to explain it or highlight interesting guys or whatever. And then it goes up.
Yeah, and it's been a pretty big year for just new things that have come to Baseball Savant. Chris mentioned the fielding run value. There's also been like base running things that you've released recently, a lot of catcher stuff. What have been some of your favorite things that you guys have released this year?
Well, the catcher thing I think was cool because that's something I've been thinking about for a while. And it was great because that's like a very baseball thing, for like 100 years, you've had base runners saying, yeah, I still have the catcher. I still have the pitcher, not the catcher. Right. And for how long have we been judging catchers just based on caught stealing rate? Where if you watch the play, you're like, yeah, that guy was like 80 feet, down the line, like, no shot. So that's actually what we're working on next is the pitcher version of that. Because right now you can only just sort by catchers. You can't look at, which pitchers are actually good or poor at doing that. So that's the next step of that, which I'm pretty excited about. And I don't want to give a date for it, but hopefully, before the end of the calendar year, at least, and hopefully before the end of the baseball year.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah. And someone whose numbers would be interesting on that just got traded with Noah Syndergaard and how poor he tends to be with base runners. I'm sure that stat would be an anomaly with him.
Yeah, well, I saw an early version of it and I went into it with 3 names in mind. Like, if these 3 guys don't pop as being like really bad at this, then we got to go back to the drawing board. And they were like 3 of the top 5, and it was him, Kenley Jansen, and Adam Ottavino. Because a lot of relievers aren't very good at this, but those names definitely popped. And I was like, all right, there's actually signal here. We're on to something.
Yeah, Chris and I are both Red Sox fans, so we could tell you with 2 of those 3.
Yeah,
like for sure. Yeah, speaking of which, we love that Connor Wong is at the top of the throwing leaderboards, the pop time leaderboards. One thing that I love about the catcher throwing one is like that it has video attached to every throw. Like Connor Wong, I think, has 2 caught stealings this year that were like under 10% like probability, and getting to see those I think is like one of the cool features that you guys attach to that one as well.
Yeah, for the most part it's nice to be able to show video when we can. Sometimes it's tricky because video doesn't always match the eye test and people get angsty about that. I think for the catcher one it's fine, like exit velocity it's fine, launch angle is fine, but like outfield catch probability, it doesn't always match the eye test and people get all freaked out about that. But for the catcher one, yeah, we try to do that whenever possible. I'm hopeful we'll be able to do more of that as time goes on.
Yeah, it's kind of like seeing the stuff that you can see now as compared to even just like 5 years ago. It's almost like you're living in fantasy land, like how much access you do have to certain things, and that's largely thanks to what the great people at Baseball Savant are doing. One thing, one of the bigger parts of your career has been a contribution to what actually is now out of baseball, but the StatCast broadcasts, which a lot. I know Daniel and I have really enjoyed, really bringing a great a newer perspective, a perspective that isn't talked about as much on the national scale. What were some of your favorite memories speaking on the baseball or the StatCast broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, my first memory is just that I made some people who are now pretty good friends of mine, right? Jason Panetti and Eduardo Perez, and Andy Jacobson, our producer. Just like those connections were great. The first time we did it was the wild card game. Well, we did a home run derby, but the first game we did was the Cubs Rockies wild card game in 2018. And I remember being impressed that they were treating it like a real broadcast, because people in the past had tried this and it was like a round table from a studio somewhere. And this was like, nope, we are in Wrigley. You're getting a booth. We get to talk to the managers. They gave us a real play-by-play person in Jason, who's the voice of the White Sox, and then obviously Eduardo, who has a baseball life dating back to his dad and his own career and all that. And like they treated it like a real thing. And the first time it was like, okay, is this going to work? What didn't make it easier was not knowing who was playing in the game. If you remember the way that season ended, there were like, I think 2 tiebreaker games. So I remember we flew to Chicago.
63s,
yeah, we flew to Chicago and it was like, maybe we'll drive to Milwaukee tomorrow. We'll see. So I mean, there's a lot of prep that goes into those games. So that made it very difficult. And in fact, we hadn't done it before. And we got lucky because, it's a Cubs game. It's at Wrigley. It went extra innings like that. Not being like a blowout, boring game is certainly something you can't control for, but it certainly worked in our favor. And it's funny. Part of the reason it doesn't happen anymore is I think it's like we're the victim of our own success, because a lot of that stuff is just mainstream now. In 2018, it was like revolutionary to put some of the stuff up, and now it's on like every broadcast. And like the main ESPN Sunday night broadcast, well, they have Eduardo now, and they have Andy, who's our producer now, and like it's a little harder to second screen against like David Cohn, who knows almost everything I do, but also had like a borderline Hall of Fame pitching career, So sad it's kind of gone, but I'm glad we seem to have made an impact.
I do miss it a lot. And going back to your point of it's mainstream now. I remember in 2021, I would watch the broadcast, and then like anything that you brought up, I would like try to like research on my own on Savant to see like to kind of test like how much I knew how to find on Savant at that point and what I still needed to work on. And it was like, I think a pretty good rate. But I remember watching a Red Sox Yankees game with my dad, and it was like a blowout Yankee win. Not a fun game to watch for me, but like, you guys were going into everything, and my dad was like, why isn't this more mainstream? And I was like, Dad, I've been asking that for like 3 years now. Like it's a fantastic question.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly has become that way, right? It makes it fun because it's 2 things, right? It makes it fun because you don't have to convince everybody why that stuff is valuable, and it also makes it harder because it's not as like revolutionary to be like, look at this cool thing, and they're like, yeah, I know, we've already seen the cool thing. We've always got to try to push harder to find the next cool thing. But the shows that do it right, it doesn't have to be like scary. It can just be, hey, I mean, some of it's so baseball-y. Now we can show you who runs the fastest, who's got the strongest right field throwing arm. Like that's just scout stuff, really. You can start with there. You don't have to do like expected metrics and all this kind of stuff if you don't want to. You can say who hits the ball the hardest. Like that stuff's not scary to me. If you want to go deeper, you can, especially with the pitching stuff. If you want to say, hey, why did the first place Orioles acquire this guy from the terrible A's who had an 8.57 ERA, right? Well, here's why. Here are the metrics that tell you why the Orioles haven't lost their minds. And I think if you're going to explain some of the things that teams are doing, you got to kind of at least have a cursory understanding of some of the stuff.
Right. Yeah. And I kind of ran into that a little bit when people were talking about Luis Arise, having crazy low exit velocity, but high expected batting average. And I think people were like, oh, this stuff is broken. Like how could this possibly be? And then I think it reminded me like, okay, maybe the quote unquote nerds and the quote unquote old school baseball people are not that different, because we both agree that strikeout rate, like having a low strikeout rate is great for a contact hitter, and having a high line drive rate and a low pop-up rate is also great for a guy like Luis Arise, and that works for him. And it's not that different. It's just we use different things to evaluate the player.
Yeah, a lot of that was just like a big straw man argument where people would be like, oh, his page has blue on it, so the nerds think he's terrible. And it's like he's like 5th in the league in PS Plus or whatever. Like the nerds don't think he's terrible. I also remember people getting angsty. It's like his expected batting average was like 50 points below his actual batting average. And that's not to say that the number is infallible. Like you can always improve on a model. So should it have been closer? Sure, maybe. But also at the same time, I was like, he's hitting like 410. You're telling me he's not overperforming in any way? Like he's not going to hit 410 all year, and he hasn't. He's hit like, I don't know, 280 for the last 6 weeks. So you can kind of, depending on what your opinion or agenda might be, you could sort of tell whatever story you want with some of these.
Exactly.
A 400 expecting batting average is like a borderline impossible.
Right. That it would have been more broken if it said that, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. You would have to have the same batted ball literally every single time, which is like, that just can't happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
70% sweet spot rate, something like that.
Yeah. The Louis,
exactly. I've taken to calling him launch angle god, right? Because that's what he does. He hits the right launch angle.
Right. Yeah.
The right one for him. Yeah. Yeah. The Luis Ariz discourse has been it's been interesting this year for sure on both sides of the pendulum.
Yeah, I mean, he's a great hitter, but the people who thought the Twins gave up a 400 hitter weren't paying attention.
No.
Absolutely. So I think to sort of, end on a bang here, we ask every guest the same question to end the interview, and it is wonderful to get all perspectives and all the different guests desires with this question. And the question is, if you could retrieve, just retroactively retrieve any baseball player in baseball history's StatCast data, you kind of get their percentiles, you get where they rank without getting any of the other players' statistics, so you don't get that relativity compared to the other players, but you get their singular StatCast data. Who are you going for in baseball history?
Is there a person who hasn't said like Barry Bonds' barrel rate or exit velocity or something? Because that seems like the most obvious answer there.
It has been said.
Yeah, I mean, that's the place you got to start. No, I think I would. I don't know. I would find like, I'd love to know Sandy Koufax's pitch shapes and pitch metrics. You know what I mean? Because without taking anything away from, obviously, all-time great, you go back to some of the lineups of the 60s, and the bottom third of those lineups, well, first of all, no DH, right? The bottom third of those lineups, you look at him and it's like, these guys are like 140 pounds. And there are a lot of reasons there was no offense in the 60s, and that was part of it. And I would just love to know, like, did he have incredible rise? Did his curveball have like wild spin rate? I'm sure the answer is probably yes to some of that. I would love to know exactly what made him so great.
Yeah, right. That's a good answer. We haven't gotten Sandy Koufax yet. Also, I don't know how much of I guess Sarah Langs did say Willie Mays, but I don't know how much of that era we've even really gotten.
Right. Yeah, Willie Mays, everybody asks me, this has come up a lot. And they're like, can you look at the video and tell me the catch probability of the catch, right? The famous 1954 World Series catch. And the answer is no, it just doesn't work that way. And the secondary answer is, and you probably wouldn't like it because, it's a great play, but people forget just how much depth there was in center field in the Polo Grounds. So he had a lot of space to run. I'm guessing it wouldn't actually pop to like 1% like people would want it to be.
It would probably have an expected slugging of 5,000 somehow.
Maybe, but we'll never know, unfortunately.
The home run to center field everywhere.
Yeah, except for Camden somehow.
Yeah, right. Yeah, even though it's in center field.
Yeah, and with that question, it is fun because even if hypothetically Sandy Koufax was maybe even averaging just like 93 on his fastball, it still would be nice to see, like, is that 100th percentile, or is that curveball spin of maybe even just 2,400 RPM, is that 100th percentile? So I think that's always interesting because it's where you are compared to your league. You can't control the area that you played in, but it would be interesting to see where you compare in that spectrum.
Yeah, I mean, especially if you had it for everybody ever, there would be guys who accidentally had like perfect spin axis because like they obviously couldn't measure that at the time. And I'm sure you could go back to the 40s and be like, this guy threw 89 and he was great. I just couldn't hit him and nobody could figure out why. And it's like, it was probably that. And he didn't, it was an accident. Like, good for him.
Yeah, for sure.
Even going into like Illustrator charts, like I think that'd be super fun to see for anyone, and like what different eras would look like with Sandy Koufax. It's like, he's probably giving up more batted balls in a single year than anyone today, because he's pitching 350 innings a year compared to like someone maxing out, and like Sandy Alcantara being like a anomaly at 228, and then like, 20 home runs given up in that time or something like that. Like, I think that'd be fun.
Yeah, it'd also be fun to find guys you've never heard of who had insanely good raw metrics, but just didn't have that last piece, where it's like whatever changes you'd make today. Maybe it was, hey, stop throwing your crappy four seamer and throw your curveball more because your curveball is great, like, which is not a thing you could do in 1948. Or you have an amazing spin, but you have terrible shape, and if you just change your axis a little bit, you'll be great, which is like not a thing you could do in 1948. But I would love to know those guys who in an alternate universe like would have been Bob Gibson, basically.
Right, exactly. And looking back, it would be like, oh, this guy really mixed it up. He only threw his four seamer 72% of the time. He had three pitches as a starting pitcher. That's crazy. Yeah, you would see all that type of stuff. But yeah, it's been an absolute pleasure to have you on, Mr. Mike Petriello. Anything you want to promote?
Yeah, I mean, obviously keep an eye on MLB.com and Baseball Savant. I would say follow me on Twitter, but I'm not even sure that's a thing that's possible to do anymore. We are working on some stuff at Baseball Savant, that pitcher thing I was telling you about. But I think the thing that's going to blow everyone's mind, even though it's not a new metric, is the next thing we're working on is if you go to everybody's page and you see at the top, you got the little percentile sliders that say you're good and bad at that. They're very old. We have a new design we're working on that I think is going to be pretty cool, show a lot of new stats, and hopefully maybe tell a little fuller story than it currently does right now.
We are both extremely excited about that. It's been a pleasure, and yeah, keep doing what you're doing, and we will continue to consume the content. Thank you very much.
Cool. Thanks a lot, guys.
That was a wonderful interview with Mike Petriello. Good to speak with him and kind of talk all things, whether it be today or, especially with that question at the end, going into baseball history and talking about, his desire for, if he were to go back in time or just get StatCast data from any era, what his desires would be. And that's always fun to do with the last question.
Yeah, no, I think it's one of the coolest things that we've implemented into our show whenever we have a guest, because it's a very good question, and the variety of things that we get is very good, and he gave us one that we have not heard before. So yeah, shout out to him for that.
Yes, big shout out, and follow everything he does. Definitely follow on Twitter, because you at one point you're going to learn something. You're going to run into something that you haven't really thought about before, or just thought about in that certain way before. So definitely follow his work if you haven't already. I'm sure if you clicked on this, you probably were interested particularly in Mike Petriello. Maybe clicking off now, but don't click off now, because we're going to talk about these trades that have been capturing the baseball world for a multitude of reasons. The Lucas Giolito trade captured the baseball world. Lucas Giolito was traded to the Angels on Wednesday night. And
Thursday morning.
Yeah, the Angels sent over their number 2 and 3 prospects. However, them being number 2 and 3 organizational prospects, it means a different thing in every organization, but especially the Angels, because I think they have one of the lowest ranked farm systems in baseball, if not the lowest ranked. But it's nonetheless, it is their number 2 and 3 prospects. What were your thoughts on the trade?
Yeah, I think first of all, I appreciate the Angels going all in, right? I think that's kind of the main takeaway from this. People were wondering if they were going to trade Ohtani for a while, if he would be up on the market. There was MLB trade rumors said that like they were listening, and it was kind of all speculation, but I think this really put the nail in the coffin to any possible trade rumors about Shohei Ohtani, because the Angels, like you said, they gave up 2 of their top 3 organizational prospects, according to many of the publications, MLB Pipeline, Baseball America, Baseball Prospectus. with Kai Bush and Edgar Caro. And I think I kind of understand giving them up. One, because you don't really have to worry too much about Edgar Caro if you are really banking on Logan O'Hoppe succeeding. He looked very good in the couple of weeks that he played before he suffered a long-term injury this year. And Caro, who is their secondary catching prospect, he's also kind of struggled a bit this year. He's only slashing 2.6, 386, 332 for a 718 OPS and AA. He did very well in A-ball, but he hasn't really adapted to that step forward in 70 games so far this year. So this could be them using that to give up on him or whatever. And also Kai Bush, who is their number 3 prospect, the guy that was also traded. He's also struggled this year. I believe he has a 7 ERA in AA this year. He has a 5.88 ERA in 26 innings pitched in AA this year. Last year he was a little bit better, but a couple of guys that have been struggling this year. Kai Bush particularly has been struggling with home runs. He has 1.8 home runs per 9 allowed this year between AA and rookie ball, 2.1 in AA. So, obviously you see 2 and 3 and you think, oh man, 2 and 3 for a reliever and a rental starter. And it does mean a little bit different. And maybe the Angels did give up too much, but overall, I think it's a solid trade for the significantly what it means for the organization and where their stance is for the future. And I also like that they got Ronaldo Lopez out of it too. I'm pretty happy that the Angels made this trade personally.
Yeah, right. We mentioned that there were, there's potential of Ohtani being traded. And I think we both agree, and we've agreed the past few weeks, that it's sort of, media bait, sort of. It's not, I don't know if it was necessarily ever seriously talked about. Maybe there was something on the table, but the asking price obviously was going to be high. And, it would be a hard thing to ask of an organization, no matter what their farm system looked like. Even if it was the Orioles, it was going to be hard to say, all right, well, let's depart on this potential plan, of the next 5 years in order to focus on this year when maybe we're not going to re-sign Ohtani at the end of this. For me, I don't know. I look at this a lot of different ways. There's a lot of different lenses you could view this trade through. I personally think this trade was more for optics than for an actual good baseball decision. It's kind of a thing of okay, we're not letting Ohtani go. We got to buy. We're buying. And this is what you do when you buy. You get this, you get Lucas Giolito. And Lucas Giolito is, I can't disagree, is an absolute name. He's been, established as a big name and been known as a good pitcher. However, what we have seen the last 2 years from him is not what we saw the previous 3 years from him. This year alone, he has a 3.79 ERA, 4.46 FIP, 4.44 expected ERA. And since the start of last year, he is at a 4.43 ERA, 94 ERA plus, and 4.23 FIP, which is not the ace that, people got to know before that. So, the Angels are kind of banking on him being something that maybe he isn't even right now. So that's sort of the thing. And it's, I think what we're seeing here is also, this is a seller's market. No matter if the Angel, even if they're not top 100 prospects that they're giving up 2 and 3 organizationally for a guy who's been pitching like a number 3 starter is quite the, it's quite the risk. And what I will say to back off that statement maybe a little bit is the move to buy and not sell Ohtani this year. This looks a lot better if they do end up re-signing Ohtani, because
it looks,
go ahead.
It looks like they knew what they were doing all along.
Right.
Who knows, also that, if they end up spending on Ohtani this offseason, which I think the odds aren't in their favor, but I wouldn't put it at a 0% chance. They also now have to worry about re-signing Giolito and Lopez, because they're both rentals. Like they don't really have a ton of starting pitching coming through the system right now. Kai Bush, I believe, was one of the 19 pitchers drafted in 2021 when they drafted exclusively pitchers, and he was kind of the one that looked the best. Obviously, he's gone now, but no one else has really stood out to that degree. Yeah, no, I agree that this move does look a lot better if they end up re-signing Ohtani.
Yeah, 100%. And maybe that's part. Maybe this is all part of the plan of like, this is potentially a selling point for Shohei Ohtani of like, okay, we are trying to win. We want to get you to the playoffs, when we haven't been able to do that at all in your time here, even with the expanded playoffs. However, yeah, I think that's part of why I say this is more for optics than an actual good baseball decision, because objectively, if you took the names out of it, if you took the history out of it and you thought, okay, this team is 3 games out, their roster outside of this one star is either not that good or injured right now. If you look at it that way, then you're like, okay, maybe getting this sort of, I'd say, overpriced starters along with the reliever. I know there is a reliever involved, but this overpriced starter, maybe that's not the best decision. But when you add the sort of politics of it, I think it makes a little bit more sense. However, yeah, I mean, I don't know if I can get a complete opinion on this until we see where the Angels end up this year and where the Angels end up on the Ohtani sweepstakes once he becomes a free agent.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair. I want to dive into the 2 pitches that they got, though. Giolito, obviously, the numbers haven't been what you want them to be, say like since 2020. But the potential is there, and it really lies on his ability to keep the ball in the park. Over his last 9 starts, he has a 3.42 ERA, which is solid. He does have a 4.46 FIP, however, and that's largely exclusively because of his home run rate. He's given up 9 home runs in his last 53 innings pitched. That's not a good rate. That's not what you want. And that's why his FIP is so inflated. And it is a large part of why he's kind of fallen off over these last couple of years. But if he keeps the ball in the park, his strikeout to walk numbers are good enough to where, you're getting what you paid for from him, even if it's just for 2 months. And then with Lopez as well, he only gave up 1 home run in all of last season in 65 innings pitched, and he's given up 7 this year in 40 something innings pitched. So the home run ball has been a problem for him. His strikeout to walk numbers are also solid. Or at least his walk numbers haven't been fantastic this year in particular, but he strikes out a lot of guys. He gets outs. But yeah, he needs to keep the ball in the park. The Angels are really relying on these two pitchers to be able to contain the home run ball. And if they can do that, I think all things considered, this will end up being a solid trade. That's really my big analysis on how this trade can become a success for the Angels.
Right, exactly. And I mean, this, and no matter what they do, if they don't make the playoffs, if they don't make the playoffs and they don't re-sign Ohtani, this looks like a bit of a disaster if we're being honest. And that's the risk that the Angels apparently are willing to take. And they're 3 games out of the wild card spot right now. However, they've won 8 of their last 10, but they've also lost, I think, 16 of their last 29. So depending on the scale, you could say they're hot or they're cold. And in this 8 wins out of 10 stretch, or 8 wins in 10 games stretch, I know that consists of a sweep of the Tigers, a sweep of the Yankees, and I forget the other team that they played, but a team that was not doing particularly well. And upcoming, they have the 6th hardest strength of schedule remaining, according to Tankathon, which I've been able to trust. I think that they just go off based off of winning percentage, but at this point, that's pretty reliable to go off of. They have the 6th hardest remaining strength of schedule. They have the Yankees and Red Sox ahead of them in the race to get to that spot, that 6th wild card spot. So they run that risk. And yeah, I think there's a giant risk. I think a lot of, Artie Moreno's legacy it's kind of on the line here with the results of this trade. With not selling Ohtani, he's not going to be the owner that traded away the best player on the planet. He's not going to do that. But he is the owner so far that has not built the good team around the best player on the planet for around a decade, whether it's Trout or Ohtani, because they've both been the best player on the decade, best player on the planet. And he could be the owner that let the best player on the planet go without ever going to the playoffs or getting prospects to set up the future after Ohtani. So he runs a risk with this trade. Absolutely. So we'll see how it goes. But, if this could be a miracle run where, hey, maybe they take that playoff spot. Maybe they make a run in the playoffs. I just see that as unlikely. So that's why I see it as a major risk to, not seriously talk about trading Ohtani and going full buy here.
Yeah. And I mean, I think, ownership is definitely the most to blame for this ineptitude over the last decade of being unable to make it to the playoffs with the best player on the team or in the best player in the league. And at some point, two of the best players in the league. This year, however, has been, I think, a little different. I think it's just more been unfortunate. There's been a lot of underperformance from a lot of guys that they relied on. Tyler Anderson came in as a signing that we loved. We thought he got way below his market value, and he just hasn't performed on any front. Reed Demers hasn't taken the step forward that we hoped he would. Patrick Sandoval has kind of regressed a little bit on the pitching side of things, but also, they have been very plagued by injury, whether it's Logan O'Hoppe, whether it's Brandon Drury, whether it's Mike Trout, at several points throughout this season. Like, they have, suffered a lot of unfortunate luck this year on the injury side of things. And also a lot of the players just simply haven't done their jobs. And yeah, I think I think we can both agree that at this point in the Trout Ohtani era, this is the best chance they've had. So, right. Might as well give it one last shot. If it blows up, but I think they'd rather go for it now than not look back when things could still be bad without Ohtani for a long time and think we could have at least gone with it one more time with him.
Yeah, there is that perspective. And, there is a question of like, okay, what do the Angels have to lose at this point? I mean, it's been, 8 consecutive years without a postseason appearance. It's been almost a decade and a half since a single game playoff victory. So, if they're bad for another extra couple of years because they decided not to trade Ohtani at some point, then, it's just another couple of years added to, a decade and a half of underperformance, unfortunately. So there is that perspective. It is a generational player not even generational, like once in a century type player that you're dealing with. So yeah, there is that perspective, and they are 5 games above 500. I mean, last year they ended up like 16 games below 500. So they're in a good spot comparative to what they usually are. But yeah, nonetheless, I believe it can be a big risk here. However, yeah, there are a lot of things that go into it. From the White Sox perspective, so yeah, obviously they've decided to full sell, which is probably a good decision on their part, at least with Giolito. Do we think this is sort of like the first domino to fall, or do we think that they sort of stop with this?
I don't really know that the dominoes can fall, because I think I mentioned on last show, like Luis Roberts probably the only untouchable guy in there. Yasmani Grandal in his contract, I'm not sure. Tim Anderson, I think, could probably go. I think he probably will go, honestly. I know that they're very much selling low on him. Eloy Jimenez is a guy that could maybe go. Ultimately, I don't think they're stopping at this. Lance Lynn will probably go. Dylan Cease might go. Yeah, I think Dylan Cease is probably like the big name out there in the pitching market, and he has been for the entire year. Yeah, I think this is certainly the first domino to fall. And it's crazy the way that things have transpired. This was a team that we got really excited about when they traded, like the big one was really when they traded Jose Quintana and got back Eloy and Dylan Cease, which, that was when we were like, okay, this team's got a farm. This team's going to have a really good team. And then in 2020, the pandemic shortened season, they were like leading the AL Central for a large part of the season, and they fell apart in the last couple of weeks and snuck in at the 7th seed. But, we were thinking, okay, like this is the start. This is when we really start to see it from them. And then 2021, they, win an easy division, and then, like get snuck out. They get stuffed out of the playoffs in 4 games. 2022, they're mediocre. They finished 500, and this year, it's just been a complete disaster. I don't think, I know that Chris, you predicted the White Sox to win the division, and I predicted them to finish second, I think, but I don't think anyone could have predicted it would be this bad.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And one thing we talked about preseason was the hardest teams to predict. And the White Sox were one of the hardest teams to predict because there was potential for this, but we didn't think this would happen. We figured, 81 and 81 was the anomaly, not 93 and 69, like what they were in 2021. We figured last year was the anomaly and not 2021. And we're finding out that I guess that just they had the pieces, like we mentioned last episode, they had all the pieces in place. It just never worked. It just never worked to its full potential and didn't really come close to reaching their full potential. Maybe 2021 is the example where they got close, but they were a potential, they could have been a potential World Series contender, but they never reached it.
Yeah. I mean, it's honestly, I think we got to look at it as one of the, people love to praise the Astros for their rebuild, the Orioles for their rebuild. And, they had to suffer through a lot of terrible seasons, but, Astros fans got a dynasty. Orioles fans are set up for, competitive baseball for the next decade plus. It also doesn't work out sometimes, like the Pittsburgh Pirates is a perfect example. Like they're still kind of going. They're now selling off pieces that were from the rebuild. The Detroit Tigers, the same thing. And the White Sox, I think, is the best example of, they spent years in the basements, losing 100 games a season, building for the future. That future came, they were competitive, and then it kind of just fell apart. I mean, people love to point out oh, we want to rebuild because we want this team's rebuild. It doesn't always happen like that. Sometimes you aim for an Astros rebuild and you get a White Sox rebuild. So, I think we should, this is a good example of how tanking doesn't always work. And now the White Sox have essentially just wasted a bunch of time from 13 through 19.
Yeah, right. Exactly. And I think what also, and I definitely agree with your point. I think what also should be noted is rebuilding doesn't just mean, you get a bunch of high draft picks and then they work. You need a development system within that, because obviously when you draft, especially if you draft a guy at a high school, there's a 3 to 4 year period between them getting drafted and them going to the MLB. And they've had a lot of high draft picks, but most of them just have simply not worked out. And going back to 2015, it was Carson Fulmer at number 8. That just hasn't worked out. At number 10 in 2016, Zach Collins. When do you hear that name?
It's traded for Reese McGuire.
Yeah, I'm literally just going through drafts right now. 2017 was Jake Berger, who's sort of working out now, but I don't know if you would value him as that guy was a first round draft pick. Of course he was. He's a decent player. 2018, Nick Madrigal. I guess you got him in that out in that Craig Kimbrell trade, but still that's a guy who just generally hasn't worked out. And in 2019, Andrew Vaughn at number 3 overall. We just haven't seen him break out. And that has to do something with organization. It doesn't just happen by accident that you have 5 straight first round picks that aren't really breaking out. There's something organizationally that didn't work out, and we're kind of seeing the results of that.
Yeah, I mean, the MLB draft is the biggest lottery out of all of the professional sports drafts between the NFL, the NBA, the NHL, because if you look through any first round of a draft, you're going to see a lot of guys that just didn't pan out. But yeah, I mean, if it's happening every single year that you're drafting a guy that just doesn't, maybe he doesn't make it to the majors, maybe he makes it to the majors and doesn't make that kind of impact. Like if that's happening every single year, and it does for a lot of organizations, like you are doing something wrong. And that is a major piece of why a rebuild doesn't work. The Astros, they drafted Carlos Correa, they drafted Alex Bregman, they drafted countless guys that ended up making a real impact for them and getting eventually big contracts, whether it be with the Astros or elsewhere. The Orioles drafted, Adley Rutschman was like the obvious pick, but like they also drafted, Heston Kjerstad. They reached for him at number 2, and he's a big name prospect now. They reached for Colton Cowser at 5, and he's a big prospect now. They drafted Gunnar Henderson in the 2nd round. Like those are picks that weren't obvious that worked. And it doesn't happen like that for every organization. And, you don't even have to have it happen 100% of the time, but you got to hit on a couple, and the White Sox hit on virtually none.
Right. Like it's crucial in a rebuild to either hit on those guys or like draft them and develop them extremely well and reach that potential that made them, a top 5 or top 10 draft pick. And it doesn't even like with good farm systems, you don't even have to be a team that loses a lot to have good prospects. You develop those prospects. I mean, the Dodgers have been like a top 5 farm system forever, and they haven't had an early draft pick since like we were literal children, or like even before that. Like they haven't had those early draft picks, yet they still continue to just draft and develop, or sign internationally and develop these really, really good players who end up really good, probably because of their great development system, whatever it is. We're not on the inside able to know these things, but they have something working for them. And it just seems like the teams like the White Sox have not been able to find that, or find those guys, or not look deep enough to get, a good development system in place. It's very complicated. We can't identify exactly what it is, but we're seeing what's happening, and it's just kind of, and look at the White Sox now. I think they have like a bottom 5 farm system or something like that, or maybe bottom 10. Maybe it's gotten a little bit better, but I know they've sort of depleted it, and now they're in a real standstill.
Yeah, and their farm system has gotten a little better. Obviously, Edgar Quero now becomes their number 1 prospect, and like number 60 overall or something like that on MLB.com. Noah Schultz has developed nicely as a pitcher this year. Colson Montgomery has developed nicely over the last couple of years. So their farm system has gotten better, but it still isn't, one of the best ones in baseball by any means.
Yeah, absolutely. So, that's where those two teams stand with the Angels and White Sox. There's a lot you can talk about there, obviously, as we just did. Anything more you want to get into there before we move on to the next trade?
I think that was kind of everything.
Sounds good. So yeah, as we mentioned, there was another big trade. There's been a couple, minor trades, but one we'll get into with two guys with major league talent. Amed Rosario of the Cleveland Guardians, shortstop. He was traded to the Dodgers for Noah Syndergaard, starting pitcher. What did you think about this deal?
I was very thrown off by it, I will say. It doesn't surprise me that Amed Rosario got traded, even though I'm pretty sure they literally just extended him. I would have thought it was for a little more than this, though, because we were in a group chat together when it went down, and I said apparently Syndergaard's going to the Guardians, and I was like, that's probably just part of the return. That can't be it, and that was it. They did send cash considerations over. I'm assuming that just means the Dodgers are like kind of eating Rosario's contract, because I do believe that he was extended, right? Was that just Jimenez, or was Amed also extended?
Yeah, I don't know.
Remembering that correct, I'm pretty sure Amed Rosario got a extension from the Guardians.
No,
Nope.
I think...
No, he didn't. He's just an ARB.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's a free agent after this year. So
Okay.
it's two
Wow.
two
So okay,
complete
so for
rentals.
rental. I can't believe Ahmed's already almost a free agent. I feel like he was just a top prospect like yesterday.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. It doesn't, it feels very weird. It feels very weird. Yeah, this also threw me off, and I don't know if there is a winner to the trade particularly. Like, I don't know what's gonna go on here. I'm curious as to how the Guardians utilize Noah Syndergaard. I'm curious to see how the Dodgers utilize Amed Rosario. Like, he is a shortstop, and the Dodgers have been sort of lacking in shortstop since Trey Turner left last year. They tried out Miguel Rojas. They put Mookie Betts there, which kind of worked out, but they want him in a better position for him. But with Amed Rosario, like, you're bringing him over, and his negative 15 outs above average and his below average offense, and you're like, okay, how are the Dodgers going to use him? Are they going to make him better? Like, what's the deal here?
Yeah, and then at the same time, you look at Noah Syndergaard, who is only 30 years old and has just unfortunately just become such a different pitcher after Tommy John surgery for the worse. His strikeout numbers are still down from like around the same rate that they were last year with the Angels and Phillies, around 16%. His walk rate is fantastic, always has been. He's always been a solid pitcher with preventing walks, but he's kind of just getting hit really hard this year. He has a hard hit rate against of 39%, which I guess isn't awful. It's 44th percentile, but he has a very high expected batting average against, a high expected slugging against. Guys are kind of just finding the right part. I guess they're finding the right launch angle against him, is what you could say. But his pitch arsenal, if you look up and down at that, there's really nothing redeeming. He has 5 pitches that he's thrown this year. Actually, he might have 6. He has 6 pitches that he's thrown this year. All of them, with the exception of his split finger, which he's only thrown exactly 4 times, have a slugging percentage above 500, and 2 of them are at 600. So you look up and down this arsenal, and there's nothing really that you're like, well, that's the pitch he's got to lead with, just based on results from this year. I mean, if you want to look specifically at it, his sinker, which he throws primarily now, it has a launch angle against of 11 degrees, which that's really all you need to know. Because if you throw a sinker, you're trying to get ground balls. And I mean, if you look at the contour on his pitch arsenal on his Savant page, he's throwing his sinker pretty consistently high in the zone, or even just in the strike zone in general, which is not where you want it. You want guys to be kind of reaching down low for it, so they're getting below the baseball and hitting a ground ball. And it just hasn't been working that way for him. So, the Guardians, obviously they're known for solid pitching and being able to fix guys or get more out of guys that they don't expect as much out of on the pitching side of things. So I'm interested to see how they, approach this with Syndergaard, this little project they have now here.
Right. Yeah. They have been known for good pitching development, especially at lower levels, but also at the MLB level, like being able to have guys be really, really good when they maybe weren't before. But yeah, with Syndergaard, like there are many concerns you can have. I think it's been documented what his velocity has done. His sinker and four seam velocity have both dropped 5.2 miles per hour since 2019, and I think that is that's the explainer for the strikeout rate going down to 15% right now. And you mentioned, like, okay, the hard hit rate is 39.9%, which isn't, obviously that's not a crazy bad number, but when your strikeout rate is 15%, that number is emphasized more because you're giving up. That hard hit rate is hard hit rate for all batted balls, but not, like, I'm sure his hard hit rate for like per plate appearance is, a lot more concerning because he's not putting guys away with strikeouts. So he's giving up just generally more hard hit balls because there's more contact. So that's why his expected ERA is in the mid 5s, because, he's not giving up, he's not getting strikeouts. And when you're not getting strikeouts, you need to give up the lowest amount of, the lowest level of contact possible. And that hasn't been going on either. He's given up, worse than average contact, worse than average barrel rate, worse than average hard hit percentage, all that stuff. So yeah, that's what's been plaguing him in general. Just nothing's really going right. But there's always potential with the Guardians, but yeah, I kind of trust both teams here. I think both teams do generally well with trades, although the Dodgers have dropped off some weird guys, to get some players that maybe weren't all that worth it. But this isn't the scenario. It's two major league level guys, so I'm sure both teams see the potential in the guy that they traded for.
One thing that intrigues me about Syndergaard specifically, he's obviously lost the fastball velocity. I mean, if you look at his percentile rankings, he was perennially in the top 3 percentile, and then he dropped off to 50th percentile in 2022, 21st percentile in 2023. It's pretty clear, unfortunately, that Tommy John surgery just took a couple miles an hour off. And, at the age of 30, that's not something that you're normally prepared for. That's usually something that goes on in your, mid to late 30s. But his extension off the mound is also kind of decreased. He was 98th and 95th percentile, respectively, in 2015 and 16. 2017, he kind of dropped off to 58th percentile. Now he's at 64th this year. He used to get about 7 feet off the mound in 2015 and 16, which were, I guess, kind of the best years of his career, statistically speaking. And it's dropped off to about 6.5 feet now. And I know that doesn't seem like a lot, but that makes a difference. It especially makes a difference when you're throwing hard, but when you're not throwing hard, it makes it that much easier to see the ball as a hitter when it's not coming in from as close. That gives you another split second to make a decision on whether to swing or not. And Noah Syndergaard's still a big guy. He's 6'6", a very tall pitcher. If you can find that again, I think there's at least a little bit of something there that he could fix up.
Yeah. That's an interesting point to bring up, because I don't know. I'm wondering how that's so mechanical. I'm wondering how that does get fixed. I wonder if that's a health issue. I wonder if it's a mobility issue that he's developed or something. Does he not have as big of a stride? I think that's definitely something for the Guardians to look at, but I'm wondering if it is fixable. But yeah, that is definitely an interesting point to bring up, because obviously, Major League Baseball players, they don't shrink. Their arms don't get shorter. That's not the reason that extension is decreased. There's something mechanical that's going on there. So yeah, it's an interesting point to bring up. Anything more on this old trade here?
No, I don't know. I mean, Amed Rosario was significantly regressed defensively. He was 84th percentile in outs above average in 2020, but every other year he's been kind of bottom of the barrel. I'm interested to see if that's something the Dodgers could fix. If he's going to be at best a league average bat, you're going to need to at least have some kind of defense to justify having him play every day. And he hasn't done that for the Guardians. He certainly hasn't been an average bat for the Guardians this year. He has an 89 OPS plus, but he also just has not been playing defense, and that's been, kind of an issue.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess it does make sense for the Dodgers to go in the shortstop market, because from their shortstops, they have the 8th least production in terms of FWAR. However, and also they have a 70 weighted runs created plus from their shortstops, which is probably bottom 5 if I click on it. But in layman's terms, the Dodgers have just not gotten really any production from their shortstops, and maybe they're looking for more offensive production out of their shortstops, which is why they're looking at a guy like Amed Rosario, who was an above average bat last year and is near average. I think near an average bat this year, a little below it. I know he's at a sub 700 OPS, but yeah, the Dodgers shortstops are 6th worst in weighted runs created plus. So I'm sure they're looking for an offensive boost, adding to, they're adding to Kike Hernandez in the middle of the infield, who they also have added since last episode. So yeah, they're making some minor moves to maybe give some added depth in the in the middle of the infield and figure out what their roster is going to be like for the playoffs.
Yeah, I agree. I think adding Kike Hernandez is more fan service than anything.
Yeah, there haven't been many redeeming qualities from his game this year.
No.
On
really any. That's it. And then I think Amed Rosario was the more serious move.
Yeah. For sure. Yeah, the Kike trade was interesting. I know as Red Sox fans, we're kind of both glad at the return the Red Sox got. Like,
yeah, they got Nick Robertson was the name of the guy, pitcher.
Yeah,
guy in AAA.
Right. Very good strikeout to walk numbers. And had good, has good stuff. It's just at the major league level, he needed to literally like allow less line drives, and he's pretty much good. And that I feel like that's more fixable than if he had a low strikeout rate. So yeah, anything more before we get into players to highlight?
No, I think that was everything I had.
All right. So now we move on to the part we have most prepared for our, and we'll start out with the good players, and we will go on to our Friday, July 28th or 29th. Wait, what day is it?
28th. It's the 28th. Yep.
Friday, July 28th, 2023 edition of How About That?
He's striking out less, walking more, and he's also making better contact.
Turning into a strikeout machine just out of nowhere.
He's been excellent all around this year.
He is getting a
How About That?
So this How About That for today, I think we both knew that it was going to happen soon enough. It is ARR alum Tristan Casas, who's been hitting extremely well for the Red Sox, dating back to June 16th. That is his last 28 games. He is slashing 355, 434, 699 for an 1133 OPS and a 204 weighted runs created plus. During the span, he ranks third in the majors in batting average, third in on-base percentage, third in slugging, and then obviously third in OPS, and then second in weighted runs created plus behind Shohei Ohtani, which fair. Before the span, he had a sweet spot percentage of 28.5%, and in this span, it has jumped to 44.9%. That means that a lot more of it, almost half of his batted balls have been between 8 and 32 degrees. That's usually where you want it. Additionally, 31.9% of his batted balls have been hard hit and in the sweet spot. So it's been in that zone of launch angle, plus 95 miles per hour. That is the third highest rate among the 255 hitters with at least 50 batted balls in this span. That's Tristan Casas ranking third there. He has also done the most damage specifically against fastballs. In the span, he is hitting 405 against four seamers, cutters, and sinkers. That is the 10th highest among the 285 hitters with at least 25 batted balls in the span. And his 905 slugging and 568 WOBA both lead that list of 285. So he has the highest slugging and the highest WOBA against fastballs in baseball in this span. And he is also hitting 300 and slugging 500 against breaking balls and off-speed pitches in the span. And that is thanks to his swing and miss rate on those pitches going from 38.2% before the span to 29.3% in this span. So still not a great swing and miss rate, but certainly a lot better than 38.2%. So Tristan Casas has been hitting extremely well. He's swinging and missing less. He's absolutely destroying fastballs. And he's been one of the best hitters in the league for over a month now.
Yeah, Tristan Casas.
How about that?
All we were missing was the song Peppa's. I forget the artist, but yeah, you just needed to talk loudly over music for that to be a true Tristan Casas highlight. But yeah, it's been, as Red Sox fans, it's been a pleasure to watch, especially knowing what his potential was. And, people were really down on him in April and early May, but ever since then, it's been a treat to watch him. And he's also just not even considering skill, just one of the most entertaining at bats to watch, or technically plate appearances to watch, because he does walk a lot. But yeah, he's a fun guy to watch, and it's been a pleasure to watch him blossom. My how about that is from one of the Twin Cities, not actually, but he's on the Twins. It is, I've seen it. I haven't seen his full name pronounced because the broadcasters call him Eddie. So I'll just call him Eddie Julian, of the Minnesota. Edward. Yeah, Edward.
It's spelled in a non-common way, but it is just Edward Julian.
Okay, I know the French pronunciation, which I looked up, was like Edouard, but I don't think he's going by that. I think he's just going by Edward. But Edward Julian, in his last 17 games, he is hitting .423 with a 1374 OPS. He's been unbelievable in his last 17 games. Out of 189 qualifiers in this span, Julian leads in batting average, is second in on-base percentage, second in slugging, second in OPS, and he leads in weighted runs created plus. Out of 215 hitters with 200 plus pitches seen in this span, Julian is second in expected batting average, first in expected slugging, and first in expected WOBA. And a lot of this has had to do with him just straight up hitting the ball harder. His average exit velocity has gone from 87.0 miles per hour to 91.6 miles per hour. And his fly ball rate has gone from 21% to 30%. And his average exit velocity on fly balls has gone from 93.1 miles per hour to 96.1 miles per hour. And on fly balls in this span, he is 10 for 11 with a 28-18 slugging percentage. The extra exit velocity on his fly balls has really increased his performance and increased his barrel rate from 11% to 32%. And out of 273 hitters with 25 plus batted balls in the span, Edward Julian leads in barrel rate. And his sweet spot rate has also gone from an already good 39% up to 51%. And his sweet spot rate ranks third out of 273. Along with that, he's gotten better, along with him barreling up the ball well, hitting harder fly balls and hitting more fly balls. He's also making more contact in general. His strikeout rate has gone from 35% to 25%, and his whiff rate has gone from 35% down to 22%. So Edward Julian of the Twins, he's a second baseman. He's been barreling up the ball like crazy and also making more contact. So yeah, he is getting a...
How about that?
All right, so that should do it for How About That. Now we will move on to the players and subjects that have been underperforming for our Friday, July 28th, 2023 edition of Slightly Alarming Statistics. He's been barreling up the ball way less.
He's not missing bats. He's not getting the ball on the ground, and people are hitting it in the air more.
It's been so bad. He is getting a...
Slightly alarming.
Yeah, so I kind of started my slightly alarming and then wasn't able to finish it due to some things that popped up. But my slightly alarming is Jeremy Pena from the Houston Astros, last year's World Series MVP. And it's been a struggle for him. Dating back to July 6th, he is slashing 155, 210, 172 for a 382 OPS and a 6 weighted runs created plus. And he's been comfortably one of the worst hitters in the league. In this span, his slugging ranks third worst among the 187 qualifiers, and his weighted runs created plus ranks fourth worst. And during this span, 46.8% of his batted balls have been 0 degrees or lower. That is the 16th highest rate among the 239 hitters with 29 batted balls. And before this span, it was about 39%. So he's hitting the ball on the ground a lot more. Additionally, I believe I don't have these numbers pulled up, but I believe he's over like 13 on any batted balls above 20 degrees. And it's because he's been hitting a lot of softer fly balls that are below the hard hit threshold or just barely at the hard hit threshold that are going to either center field or left center or right center. He's just not placing the ball in the right place when he hits fly balls. And he's also just hitting simply a lot of ground balls. So I don't have a lot of those numbers pulled up, but Jeremy Pena just hasn't been hitting the ball the right way.
Yeah, Jeremy Pena.
Slightly alarming.
Number 64 player in baseball, according to MLB Network, top 100 right now. He was apparently 33 spots better than Logan Webb and 20 spots better than Sean Murphy. But yeah, that was a gripe I had, but good kid. Any CBL alum also. So shout out to him.
Cape League alum as well.
Cape, yeah, more importantly, Cape
Former
League
Saturday
alum.
Night.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The NECBL team he played for does not exist anymore. It's out of Plymouth.
Oh yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. But my slightly alarming, it might mean some good news for the world. I don't know what's been going on. I haven't been following the news, but it might mean things are going well because Nick Castellanos has been slightly alarming. And that might mean some good things for this universe. And if you don't know the joke, then learn it. But Nick Castellanos in his last 17 games, he is hitting 134 with a 362 OPS and a -3 weighted runs created plus. And out of 187 qualifiers in the span, his average is 7th lowest, on base percentage is 4th lowest, slugging is 6th lowest, and OPS is 3rd lowest. And out of 165 hitters with 200 plus pitches seen in this span, his expected batting average is 9th lowest, expected slugging is 2nd lowest, and expected WOBA is 4th lowest. So his actual numbers are bad, and his expected numbers are also very bad. Nick Castellanos's sweet spot rate has gone from 35% before the span to 25% in the span. And out of 247 hitters with 25 plus batted balls in the span, his sweet spot rate is tied for 36th lowest, bottom 20, maybe even bottom 15% there. And Nick Castellanos is hitting fly balls at a higher rate, and his average exit velocity on them has stayed within 0.1 miles per hour. However, despite those being largely kind of good things, his average launch angle on those fly balls has gone from 36.6 degrees to 43.4 degrees. And he has 10 batted balls with 40 plus degree launch angles, and he is 0 for 10 on those fly balls. And his rate of batted balls with 40 plus degree launch angles has gone from 12% before the span to 23% in the span. And as I mentioned, he's 0 for 10 on those batted balls. So it is a bad thing that he's increased that rate of 40 degree launch angle batted balls. And partially because of this, his barrel rate has gone from 11% to 2%. And along with him making worse contact, he's also making less contact. His strikeout rate has gone from 25% before the span to 32% in the span. That strikeout rate ranks 20th highest out of 189. And also his walk rate is only 2.8% in this span. And his walk to strikeout ratio is 11th lowest out of 189 since July 6th. And Nick Castellanos' whiff rate has gone from 35% to 41%. And out of 158 hitters with 100 plus swings in the span, Nick Castellanos' whiff rate is 3rd highest. So Nick Castellanos, he's making less contact. And when he's hitting the ball, when he's hitting fly balls, they're usually higher fly balls, which are not going to get out of the ballpark and are likely going to meet someone's glove. So Nick Castellanos, maybe for the good of the world, is getting a
slightly alarming.
So that
We would
should
do for something like that.
yeah. So that should do it for this installment of Players to Highlight, and we will get into a preview of the weekend ahead, where I will be highlighting the series to watch. Daniel will be highlighting the starting pitching matchups that you should keep your eyes out for. I think there's a good amount of meaningful series going on here with playoff contenders going against each other. And yeah, there's just a lot of things to look out for this weekend. Dodgers Reds out in LA. Both teams I think have sole possession of a spot in the playoff race. The Reds have the 6 wild cards, or the 3rd wild card spot, the 6th seed in the National League playoffs if the season ended today. And they have a challenge with the Los Angeles Dodgers, who just acquired Amed Rosario. Not the biggest deal in the world, but they did make some action. Along with that, we have Braves Brewers for the 2nd straight weekend. This time it's at Truist Park. Brewers have been doing well. They were very competitive against the Braves in that series. So it should be exciting to watch again this time in Atlanta. And along with that, you have Orioles, Yankees, the AL East leading Orioles versus the Yankees, who are fighting for a playoff spot and maybe getting back Aaron Judge soon. Also, you have Blue Jays, Angels out in Toronto. That's going to be an important series. I think the Angels have a lot to prove after this trade, and they're going to have Lucas Giolito throwing tonight. And that's going to be a really good pitching matchup with who he has against him. And the premier series to watch, with all those great series to watch, is Astros Rays. The Astros are hosting the Rays, who, despite the Rays struggling as of recently, I think still have the second best record in the American League, and maybe third best in baseball. I might be mistaken there, but I think that's the case. So, I mean, the Rays are still a team to really look out for, and they're headed to Minute Maid Park, where they will face the Astros, who are also fighting for a spot in first place in their respective division. So who do you have for the day-by-day pitching matchups?
So on Friday tonight, Zach Wheeler and Mitch Keller are going together in Phillies and Pirates in Pittsburgh. Garrett Cole and Grayson Rodriguez are facing each other in Yankees Orioles. That one, like you mentioned, will be in Baltimore. Mackenzie Gore and Max Scherzer are going against each other in Nationals Mets. Shane McClanahan and Christian Javier in Rays Astros. That's another good one. Sonny Gray versus Brady Singer in Twins Royals. Logan Gilbert will be facing the Diamondbacks for the Mariners in Arizona. Jordan Montgomery will be facing the Cubs for the Cardinals. That is in St. Louis. Cutter Crawford and Logan Webb are facing each other tonight in Red Sox Giants. And then also Brandon Williamson and Bobby Miller are facing each other in Reds Dodgers in LA. And matchup of the night, I think you mentioned it earlier. You alluded to it earlier. It comes from Angels Blue Jays. It's Lucas Giolito versus Kevin Gausman. It's Giolito's Angels debut. Gausman, of course, has been one of the best pitchers in the American League for Toronto, and that's going to be an exciting one to watch north of the border. So then on Saturday, you have Reed Detmers versus Alek Manoah in Angels Blue Jays. You have Aaron Nola and Quinn Priester facing each other in Phillies Pirates. You're going to have Bailey Ober facing the Royals for the Twins in Kansas City. Jameson Taillon and Adam Wainwright facing each other in Cubs Cardinals. You're going to have Julio Teheran and Bryce Elder facing each other in Brewers Braves at Truist Park. Brian Wu and Brandon Pfaadt facing each other in Mariners Diamondbacks. If you don't know either of those names, you should know them. Yu Darvish will be facing the Rangers, his old team, for the Padres in San Diego. And then matchup of the night comes from Rays Astros, a couple of young guys. It is Taj Bradley versus Hunter Brown.
Yeah, electric stuff going on there. And also shout out to the Julio Teheran revenge game.
Yep. Yeah, true. And then lastly, on Sunday, you're going to have Tyler Anderson and Jose Barrios facing each other. This one kicks off at 12:05, so it's going to be a 9:00 a.m. game for Angels fans. That's cool.
Woo!
It's the Peacock game. You will have Justin Verlander facing the Nationals for the Mets at Citi Field. You're going to have Tyler Glasnow facing the Astros for the Rays. Kenta Maeda facing the Royals for the Twins. Michael Kopech facing the Guardians for the White Sox. You're going to have what are we going to have? Graham Ashcraft and Michael Grove facing each other in Reds Dodgers. Luis Castillo facing the Diamondbacks for the Mariners. Blake Snell facing the Rangers for the Padres. Luis Severino and Dean Kremer going on Sunday Night Baseball in Baltimore. That's cool. And then matchup of the day might be a surprising one. Comes from Tigers and Marlins. It's Tarek Skubal versus Jesus Luzardo. Both of them have looked awesome this year. Skubal just came back from Tommy John surgery. I believe he has like a FIP in like the 1.2s or something like that. And Luzardo's been one of the best pitchers all year in general.
Yeah, I'm surprised to hear Skubal's name at this point. I did not know he recovered. It seems like a semi-quick recovery, like compared to the rest of the Tommy John surgeries. So good for him. Good for him. Good for the Tigers. All right, that should do it for this installment of Above Replacement Radio. Stacked show with good topics and a great interview with Mike Petriello. So a blast to do all morning here. And yeah, we hope you enjoyed this one. If you are listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify and want to watch the conversation as it happens, or just check out the general digital content that we have, or check out our playlist with the guest interviews, which will have a new edition there. Go to the YouTube channel and subscribe to the YouTube channel. It is called Above Replacement Radio, where we have all of that. Follow us on social media. Follow me on Twitter or X or whatever the heck it is, at Chris_Gianta. Follow Daniel on both Twitter and Instagram at Daniel_Curran, and follow the show Instagram at Above Replacement Radio for all the show needs. We hope you enjoyed this one, and we hope to see you next time, where we will be talking all the happenings in Major League Baseball. Once again, see you then.
This conversation is over.